Díagweibh Galera Cordia August Fáilte Road. Welcome to be my guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media. And my very special guest today, since we're talking and we're all consumed all over the world, I think, with the Depp trial, Johnny Depp, Amber Heard trial that's unfolding in Virginia. My very first, very special guest, I should say, is Anne Silvers, who's a psychotherapist, a counsellor and an author, and she has been blogging about this. She's actually an expert on this subject and has been blogging and writing about abuse of men for many years, actually. And her book is called Abuse of Men by Women. It happens, it hurts, and it's time to get real about it. I'd like you to join me in welcoming Anne Silvers to the show. Hello, Anne.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure, actually, because I've heard you quite a bit now on Popcorn Planet,
yes.
and other shows online, and I've subscribed to all of them because it's a great place to get information and like-minded people who are interested in the Depp trial. Tell me about your interest in it, Anne, as a professional.
Yeah, so my interest goes back before this trial.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in the last year or so, I started getting interested in it. And since they had the Sun newspaper trial in London in 2020, there's a lot, the evidence from that trial was available. Some people have done some great work on just making it easy to access. And so I studied it. I investigated what's the reality of this situation. And last year I was doing a lot of being interviewed for various podcasts and TV news, etc., about the subject of women abusing men. I started talking about the Johnny Depp's case because I got very excited about the possibility. This is going to be our watershed moment. This is where we're going to have an awakening of people to the reality. Men are being abused a lot by their female partners, and it is harmful. And so I was doing all these interviews, and I don't like to say things that I'm not sure about. So I started to really investigate the case even further, created like a timeline of the case for myself, an Excel spreadsheet with all the different things. So then I turned that into a blog post. And I investigated what's the evidence supporting or going against Amber's initial domestic violence accusation back in May 2016.
Against her then wife.
This one was Amber accusing Johnny for the first time publicly of being abused. The one that she got the temporary restraining order over. So I took a look at all the evidence in that case, created a blog post about that. And it's just very clear that the people who stood up for Amber had
motives,
personal motives. Yes. Like the, Rocky next door who John. Yeah. So Johnny been paying her rent for long time.
Forever. He seems to have been paying. I mean, he had 5 apartments in that block, and all of them were taken up with her friends. Mostly all of them.
So one was his friend, Isaac.
Isaac Burry.
Yeah. And one was Rocky Pennington, a longtime friend of Amber's, and then Rocky's fiance lived there rent-free as well.
Right, yeah.
And there was a long period of time where Amber's sister Whitney lived with them rent-free. Yeah, and then he was also paying the rent, I think, on Amber's friend T.I.
What is
OIT? I actually I forget. IO. Yes.
IO Tillett's right. Right.
Yeah.
We'd eventually get that name, but it's absolutely extraordinary what's going on, and what it seemed like he was being used from the get-go to to keep them all together in this one place. And it seemed to me, as a lay person at the moment anyway, a lay person on the subject, that he was quite happy for her to have her friends around, because it keep her happy, and he's happy. And I've known of cases where the man has been abused by his wife. In one case, murdered a person we know here in Limerick. At the moment, we can't talk about the case because it's ongoing in the States. But, men, I think it's very difficult for anyone to come forward and say that they're a victim of abuse, but particularly a man, because society seems to have this attitude of men that they have to be strong and powerful, and should give her the back of your hand is a sort of an answer to it. And what kind of a wimp are you that you would put up with that? But not all men will. They'll do what Johnny Depp apparently does, which is to walk away.
Well, a lot of men do. A lot of men do take it because of the male training. Don't hit girls. I mean, we've done a good job with that. Unfortunately, we haven't done an equally good job with training girls. Don't hit boys. Don't hit anybody. Boys don't hit anybody. Girls don't hit anybody. But instead, it's very one-sided, and we've got a lot going against men speaking up. One, the cultural silence around the issue that men are being abused by women, and that it matters. It's both pieces. And because there's a lot of discounting of, well, yeah, okay, men get beat up or men get maligned or demeaned, but it doesn't really hurt them. Somehow we have such a lack of empathy for males.
But I mean, there's this argument as well. People say, oh, in both with violence against both sexes, why don't you just leave? But it's very easy when you're in a situation, you're making every excuse against your better wishes. You're making every excuse, such as, oh, if only I was different, if only I was a better cook, if only I was a better housekeeper, if I wasn't so arty, or I was more into domesticated things, or I was a better husband or a better boyfriend, maybe things would be better. And at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and male or female, I think people react the same to abuse. Some people are geared to be able to defend themselves and to walk away. Other people bring baggage with them that prevents them from leaving in a situation like that.
Well, there's that. In a way, you're kind of tested early in relationships to see if you'll put up with some of the stuff. On the other side of it, often the beginning of relationships, they are wooing you, and so you don't see the reality. And that presentation I call dating guy and dating girl. So we all put our best foot forward when dating. That just makes sense. But then there are people who are more malicious with it, more actively covering up this very abusive side that they have.
Yeah.
Until they have trapped their target. And then the abuse starts to happen. But by then the person thinks that the original person that they started dating, that's the real person. They become convinced that's the real person. And so if I was just better, I would get back to that real person. It's my fault.
It is. That's the attitude people, I get the impression that's the attitude people have. And I know, I suppose from personal experience, it is the attitude you have. If I can only change, they will change. I'm the problem. Yeah. Do you know?
And also the other side of it, they often promise to change. Mm-hmm. And so there's that hopefulness that gets rekindled that this will be better.
Were you always interested in looking at domestic abuse in relation to men?
No. So my history is that counseling was not my first career. Microbiology was my first career. And then along the way, I decided I wanted to become a counselor. So eventually I started school all over.
I know I'm planning it in September of this year.
Yeah. So I did 11 years of part-time schooling so that I could get all the degrees to become a counselor. There's more degrees needed here. And along the way, when I did my bachelor in science in psychology, like you're going to be doing, I did a minor in women's studies.
Insane, Anne. I think I'm insane because I've already gone through the system in another subject, not too unrelated. And now I'm going back to, to go into this area because I feel it brings what I've already done, which is looking at childhood under Nazism, into this area where I can look at post-trauma and counsel people with post-trauma. But you did very much the same thing when you were when your children were growing up.
Yes, exactly.
Isn't it powerful what mature students can do?
Well, and I met a lot of what you call mature students when I was going to school. Not as mature as I am now, maybe.
For me, but I always say anyone over the age of 23 who decides to go back to college, that in itself is difficult because you're meeting all sorts of difficulties from people saying, "Why are you going back? Wouldn't you just get a job? How are you going to be able to afford it? Are you going to be going back with teenagers and all this?" And you're having this inner argument with yourself about, what you want to do versus what you should do is go out and get a job. But you have to follow your path. You have to follow your gut instinct about things.
Yes. And so I was doing my Bachelor of Psychology, and I did a minor in women's studies.
Well,
and at that point, my understanding of the feminism I wanted to be part of was about equality.
Yeah.
Not about male bashing, but about equality. And I realized that even then I was kind of that wasn't the most popular bent on issues. And a lot of that education was actually about men abusing women. And I absorbed it. And at the time, I really was belonging to the masses that believe that the really important part about domestic violence was that men abuse women. And then when I started being a counselor, I happened to have a male friend who was being abused by his wife. And he began telling me his stories, and I minimized them, just like lots of people do when men are talking about their experiences of being abused by their wife or girlfriend.
Yeah.
And then it just became so clear that it was happening. He was being abused. And so it opened my eyes, and that's kind of all it really took, because then I began to notice it everywhere. And I realized I was missing it in my clients. And once I started talking about it, men came out of the woodwork to talk to me.
Oh, dear.
And I had nowhere to send them. There were no resources that I could find that did anything more than give lip service to, sometimes men get abused by their wives, but it doesn't really matter. And let's give you all examples where he is bad and she is good. Yeah. And a man can't see himself in that then.
And I think that was never more poignant, I suppose, than with the testimony of Dr. Dawn Hughes.
Yes.
Because, nowhere throughout the entire testimony, I personally thought it was incredibly unprofessional. Nowhere in her entire testimony did she say, until she was asked on the second day of testimony, that a man could be domestically abused. The only way she conceded it in any way was when she confirmed that she had listened and she had patients who were in a same-sex relationship. So one man abused another man and one woman abused another woman. But nowhere did she say, and it was striking, nowhere did she say that she had gone into court at any stage to testify for a man who was abused or said he was abused by his wife or female partner.
So you can't recall a single instance where you were hired by the attorney representing the male in an IPV matter, correct?
In an IPV matter, not in a trauma matter or a child sexual abuse matter.
Okay, so that's the distinction. You don't have any recollection of ever testifying on behalf of a male in an IPV matter.
As I stated yesterday, the very first case that I testified in was in a same-sex intimate partner violence where the man was the victim of another man. I routinely treat and assess same-sex couples where then the female can be the perpetrator of another female, and the male can be the perpetrator or a victim of his partner.
So let me get this. You testified in a case where one male is alleged to have engaged in IPV against another male.
Correct.
All right. Okay. But that's the only one you remember. That's the only one you remember.
No, I've done this frequently. As you well know, most cases don't go to trial. I've worked on hundreds and hundreds of cases. You've limited to testimony. Many cases don't come to trial, but I've issued reports and worked on many cases of same-sex intimate partner violence where men are the victims.
But I did ask you about testimony, and I limited the question to testimony, and the only testimony that you remember is the same-sex couple, right?
There were multiple same-sex couples, I believe, that I testified
That you testified in court at trial.
I believe so, yes.
All right, but you didn't remember.
Yes, and I've transcribed her testimony, and you're right. You characterized it correctly. I'm working on a blog post now that'll be up in the next few days that analyzes her testimony about that. Now, one thing is, you said it's unprofessional. The reality is she represents the bulk, the vast majority of what I call the domestic violence community. The professionals and the advocates that are working about domestic violence, they speak just like she does. They think just like she does. She's not an outlier.
At no stage did she even, see, it was most bizarre, I thought. At no stage did she say she met Johnny Depp. At no stage did she say she spoke to him. Did she, that she listened to, even when she listened to the tape of the Amber Heard, and there's copious amounts of tapes of Amber Heard, it's almost like he is the wall, and she's shouting abuse at him, and he's trying to get something in, and he's been over shouted by her. And it seemed like Dr. Dawn Hughes was hearing that for the first time.
You indicated that you had listened to audio recordings as part of the work you did in this case?
That's correct.
All right. I'd like to play you a portion of one of those recordings. It's Plaintiff's Exhibit 343. It's already in evidence. And for the record, the portion I want to play is 2 minutes 46, 246.01 to 247.20.
I said to Travis, I said to you, hey, tell Travis what just happened.
Oh, you told me to do it. You told me to. You said, go do that.
I said, no, tell him what just happened.
And I lied.
And that you punched me in
You're
the
right.
fucking thing. And
You figured it out.
And you said, no, fuck it. No, I didn't. What the fuck are you talking about? And I
didn't
watched
punch
you lie. And then
I didn't punch you, by the way. I'm sorry that I didn't hit you across the face in a proper slap, but I was hitting you. It was not punching you. Babe, you're not punched.
Don't tell me what it feels like to be punched.
You know, you've been in a lot of fights, been around a long time. I know. Yeah.
No, when you fucking have a close
You
face.
didn't get punched. You got hit. I'm sorry I hit you like this, but I did not punch you. I did not fucking deck you. I fucking was hitting you. I don't know what the motion of my actual hand was, but you're fine. I did not hurt you. I did not punch you. I was hitting you.
How are you?
What am I supposed to do? Do this? I'm not sitting here bitching about it, am I? You are. That's the difference between me and you. You're a fucking baby.
Because you start.
You are such a baby. Grow the fuck up,
Because you start
Johnny.
physical fights.
I did start a physical
Yeah,
fight.
you did. So I had
Because-
to get the fuck out of there.
Yes, you did. So you did the right thing, the big thing. You know what? You're admirable.
That's how it appeared to me when I was looking at her reaction. It was almost like the first time she had actually seen that, and I felt, how much do you think that how wrong do you think it? Well, it's probably a leading question. But
You get to have leading questions.
yeah. But I mean, I felt personally that it's very wrong that if your only motivation by going into court as a professional person is money and is to be paid to defend solely the person that you were called by. It wasn't her first time speaking with those with Amber Heard's solicitors. She had been with them on previous cases as well. But when you compare her testimony to Dr. Shannon Curry, who remained, that's not what I'm here to do. That's not what I'm here to say. And, she seemed level-headed and balanced in her view of, that's not what I was asked to do, or this is not what I was asked to say, to comment on or to analyze. It wasn't as if she was going in there to be an advocate for Johnny Depp, the way Dr. Don Hughes was being almost another advocate against a man she had never even spoken to, and was taking the hearsay of a woman. I thought that was shocking.
So not shocking to me, because this is what I hear from her cohort. Dr. Hughes is not alone in having an agenda to support women that accuse men. I mean, we had the whole Me Too movement, which was all about every woman, believe every woman. Now, so I'm old enough to remember when women were discounted when they came forward, automatically discounted. But to go to automatically believe is just to take the pendulum and swing it way over to the other side, instead of coming to a more sensible place.
Yeah.
Which is acknowledge, consider, not discount automatically, not believe automatically, both men and women. And I think that at the beginning of Me Too, actually the person who started it had good intentions, was not as
militant, if you like.
Yes, exactly. Great word, militant about it. She actually knows men who have been abused by women, and knows about experience, has personal enlightenment about false accusations against men. But her movement got hijacked.
But how important, or I suppose for me, I thought that Amber Heard's case came out around, as you say, the Me Too movement. There should actually be a He Too movement now, to be honest with you.
Oh, that's a good word.
Yeah, He Too. But I think it came out around that, and I think she jumped on the bandwagon, as they say here in Ireland. She jumped on the bandwagon and she thought, this is going to be the perfect opportunity for me now to get my name in lights, to be seen as the face of the Me Too movement, in the face of domestic violence. And I think it's backfired on her. How must she be feeling right now with all the memes? Psychologically, how must she be feeling with all the memes? Assuming that she has any capacity to feel guilt or to feel anything other than self-absorption. How do you think a person who was in contact with senses of guilt would feel with all the memes that's going around about her now? I don't think she expected it to backfire as much as it seems to be social media wise.
Well, one of the things that happens with personalities like hers, when they lie and they get believed, especially she got believed by the masses, It's like feeding their lies. They get this, and so then the lies grow. They get bigger and bigger because they get this, they're being fed. I don't think she's very capable of guilt. So don't think that's really in the picture for her. There's and not remorse, but there is now she didn't get labeled a narcissist by Dr. Curry. I admire Dr. Curry. She was so impressive.
Histrionic and borderline PT or borderline personality disorder.
Right. And there's a lot of overlap in the personality disorders in sort of that group. So there's a lot of overlap with narcissism. And there's a great quote about narcissists, which is this guy who was a specialist in narcissists was posed the question, do narcissists cry? And his answer was, yes, they cry for themselves. Yeah. And so she's sad for herself. And that would be the limit.
But it's interesting that in all the histrionics, I mean, what we're seeing from her first 2 days on the stand seems to be bolstering, I suppose, Dr. Shannon Curry's analysis of her having this dual condition of grossly, as Dr. Shannon Curry, from what I remember, said, grossly exaggerated symptoms of PTSD, which Dr. Shannon Curry said she doesn't suffer from PTSD. And Dr. Dawn Hughes says she does suffer from PTSD. And I've heard people asking the question, well, how can you trust doctors if one says, you go for treatment and one says, yes, you do have PTSD, and another says you don't have PTSD. But when you look at her on the stand, all I keep hearing is Dr. Shannon Curry's statement of histrionic and borderline personality disorders. It just seems to be a clear case, a textbook case of, I mean.
As a result of the work that you performed, did you form any opinions with respect to Ms. Heard?
I did.
What were those opinions?
The results of Ms. Heard's evaluation supported 2 diagnoses: borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder.
What is a diagnosis?
A diagnosis is a way that that psychologists, psychiatrists, anybody in the mental health field thinks about a disorder. It helps us to communicate a set of symptoms that a person is experiencing, and along with that set of symptoms, it tells other professionals a lot about how those symptoms might have developed, how that person might behave, perceive the world. It also drives treatment. The real purpose is to determine what sort of interventions will be most effective for the person.
And what I see when Amber's on the stand is somebody who has studied people telling their abuse stories and is trying to reenact that. Yeah. And she does a very poor job of attempting to maybe because she's pulled together too many pieces or something, but it's not at all to me. Now I have already made my judgment. So I'll just,
as have I.
Yeah. So, but it's one of the things that you mentioned, Dr. Curry's diagnosis being borderline and histrionic personality disorders. One of the things about histrionic personality disorders, and I believe it's Dr. Curry actually described it like this. I have a blog post about her testimony also, and I'm picturing a graphic that I've got. And she talks about histrionic people positioning themselves as either the princess or the victim.
Yeah.
And in Amber's testimony, she does both. So she goes on in this, and also Dr. Curry talks about the flowery language of histrionic personality. So Amber's using this very flowery, I'm not saying that word very well, language. And so she's going on and on at times, her first day of testimony, about the engagement, how Johnny proposed to her, and they were at a mansion and had this party, She's
And they
doing
were
the
in this
whole,
bubble of this bubble of joy.
yeah, and she's positioning herself as the princess there.
Yeah.
And then she flips into the victim. And I think another thing with Amber in particular, she likes to be seen as the heroine. And it's so interesting to me that she ended up in a movie, in the Aquaman movie, where she's a heroine. And because that's where she wants to be. That's why she positioned herself in the Me Too movement, got involved with the ACLU, and went around the world presenting herself as this professional victim.
Yeah. I mean, it's just bizarre. What I can't understand, and perhaps you can explain it to me, is how she expects to get away with it, because there's video footage of her testimony in the UK, where she's constantly eating and she's sneering at Johnny Depp when she hears him saying, "But Amber, you did hit me, and I know what a punch feels like," and she's just laughing it off and sneering at it. And it's a completely different Amber, both in physical appearance and in demeanor, from that to what we're seeing now. But also, does she realize that there's going to be tapes coming out of the abuse that she was throwing at Johnny Depp, and admitting that she actually cut his finger off, and screaming inside in Australia, I know his security guard is dead, and obviously they can't use, but maybe his family might allow the tapes to be used. But it's so obvious she has said that she has done it, and she's denying it in court, and everything that's on the tape is exactly the reverse of what she's saying in court.
Isn't it true, Ms. Heard, that in September of 2015, you punched Johnny Depp in the face with a closed fist?
I hit Johnny one time when he. Sorry, I'll wait.
No, you answer the question. Please stop whispering, because it's distracting over here.
It's your team.
No, I was referring
No, these
to
two.
this, actually.
I can't hear them. I hear
I
them.
can't hear them.
So please answer the question.
Yes or no, did you ever
No.
punch Johnny Depp with a closed fist in the history of your relationship with Johnny?
Answer it however you feel you wish to.
The testimony seems to be she's taking Johnny's side and telling the story from Johnny's side, but from her perspective. It's almost like she's reversing in many of the situations. I had to run away from him, and it annoyed him when I ran away. And yet in the tapes, she's telling him, stop running away, because you don't know how that upsets me and gets me going. And it's almost like it's easier for her to relay an event because she's telling what actually happened, but not to her.
You make a great point. We know that she steals people's violence, the victim's violent story, because her assistant, was it Kate James, I think maybe her name,
yeah, Kate James,
has in the UK testified that Amber stole her rape story. Now, I don't know exactly what rape story that is. I don't know if it's the bottle story or what it is. But you make a great point in that what Amber's done too is steal Johnny's victim story and turned it into her own.
which makes it easier for it to flow, because it actually happened. When something happens in front of you and you just reverse the victim, almost like saying, well, imagine now that this victim was a woman, how would you feel? So every time Johnny ran away from her, she told him constantly, running away, you don't realize how it makes me feel. And she's telling in court that she had to leave him on many occasions to try and avoid an argument. But how she hopes to get away with it is beyond me, because there's video and they're going to be played, and they're the last things that's going to be played to a jury.
So that's an interesting question. And this is where I wonder if Dr. Curry's diagnosis of her actually fell a little short, and if she's really, and I'm not diagnosing her, so I want to be upfront about that, but there's signs of antisocial personality disorder, which is psychopathy, sociopaths, and sociopaths lie without conscience. So they don't have that pesky conscience to
That's what I was
question themselves. They don't have that pesky conscience to have markers on their face that they're lying, so they can be very convincing. They also, go back to the thing about crying, because they don't have a conscience. They're not going to cry when they are, for the most part, they're not going to cry. And she is having a very hard time making herself come up with some tears on the stand. So she's doing the sociopathic.
The hanky episode is particularly bizarre.
Yeah. So to speak to that, so there's what I noticed the first day she testified was there's the crying motions like I see sociopaths do without the tears. And I get very frustrated when people do commentary about these sorts of trials and things, and they say the person cried. Well, they didn't cry. They acted out crying because there's no tears. And so the next day, so the first day, no tears. The next day she came in with a prop, which was started to use Kleenex.
What's in her lap?
Mental condition.
Snort?
It's still hearsay, Your Honor.
Sniff?
May we approach you?
Oh, yeah.
Kleenex down low on her cheek to wipe away tears. Not the way that I see women who have makeup on who do their tears, because women who have makeup on, they put a Kleenex right underneath their eye.
They don't smudge.
Yeah, exactly. She doesn't do that. She's down low on her, which I think is imaginary tears wiping away. And then we have what people put on social media, noticing that when eyes aren't really on her because it looks like the judge and the lawyers are busy doing a sidebar, she's got a Kleenex held up to her nose for some period of time and she snorts in. And so a lot of people are saying that she's probably using the actor trick of menthol or something like that to try and bring up tears. And even after that, she still can't bring up tears. But she does a lot of sniffling then that second day. So she adds some sound effects that are trying to portray that crying.
But as well as that, she can go from being absolutely distraught without tears, and suddenly Johnny Depp's lawyer will say, I object, Your Honor, and it almost like cut on in a camera set. Her facial expression comes back to normal, and she looks at the judge, and then back again to the histrionics again. It's like a very bad 4-year-old trying to, or a very bad, or a 4-year-old trying very badly to get what they want.
Yes.
Look, I'm crying, Mom. I'm crying.
Yeah. And then as soon as Mom turns away or something, the tears are gone. Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, and it's not even tears. It's we have to take the tears out of it because they're not there. But there's this crying motion.
There's a crying motion. There's and I just hope that the jury are as astute and as observant, because from what I gather, there's 7 men and 2 women.
Oh. I don't know. Okay.
And they're all fairly youngish from what I gather. But, I was looking at say Dr. Kipper's testimony, which appeared, I don't know how good it is to have 2 family members, a husband and wife, both as your patients, because there's a conflict. There has to be a conflict of interest there, because he came in his deposition almost seemed like he didn't want to say quite a lot, but yet when you listen to the tapes in Australia, he's very, very emphatic that she has been the one to strike Johnny Depp and to cut his finger off, and that her antics are because she's guilty and because she feels guilt. This is because she feels guilt that she's carrying on like this.
Yeah.
And
I'll tell you what's done in that. This is guilt.
She won't take 50. I gave her 25 and 300 and said we reassess in a little bit.
but yet he didn't say it in court, and I wish he had.
Well, was his testimony in person or by video?
It was by video.
Yeah, so one of the things that happens with those video testimonies is there's battles that have gone on between each side about what will be admitted and what not. So we don't know what he might have said in part that didn't get admitted or didn't get admitted yet.
We don't see that here in Ireland. We don't, and I don't think they do in the UK either. To have video testimony, you get your backside into the court and sit down in the court. And I'm wondering how Whitney Heard is going to stand up. Firstly, I don't think Whitney Heard finished her deposition for the UK trial. From what I heard, she only did a third of it. And she claimed to be ill, and they were to reschedule. So under those conditions, I don't think she can be called as a witness because she didn't finish her deposition. I'm not 100% certain about that, but from what I've been reading, she didn't finish her deposition. So she may not be allowed to testify. But then I've also read that she is testifying. So I don't know.
I think, well, I don't know if we know beyond her being on the witness list. I'm not sure if we would know for sure one way or another. That is interesting what you're saying. I've been waiting for somebody to come up with I'm suddenly sick, so I can't testify for Amber. I was thinking Amber would do it.
Yeah, but I think Whitney has made statements from listening to, from looking at posts and reading posts. She has made statements that her father was violent with them growing up, and then her sister was violent with her. And that, again, there's financial motivation when a sister testifies, as well as familial motivation. She's your sister at the end of the day. But when you're not an actress or an actor and you're just an ordinary person and you go up and testify, it's vastly different than Amber Heard going up. So maybe Whitney, if she does go up, will break under cross-examination because, from all accounts, she was on one of these programs in the US, I think it was one of these, and she had bruises on her, and they were asking her, did her sister do that to her? She was saying, I don't want to talk about it. And from a lot of the media, she's also been abused by, and that it was actually Amber that almost pushed her down the stairs, not the reverse. Not Johnny Depp, that it was Amber, and that she moved in with another family. She moved in with another family so that, and they asked her why, and she said because she was afraid that her sister was going to kill Johnny Depp, and that there was a tussle, and she almost caused Whitney to fall down the stairs. So there's going to be a lot of contrary opinions, I think. Not sure what you think.
Yeah, so you bring up a really great point. If Whitney was brought in, there's also a video of Whitney saying that she had just been beat up by Amber. So the other side would be questioning her about that. Johnny's side would be questioning her about that, and potentially bringing in something like the video, because for perjury purposes, you have a lot more things that you can bring in than a first presentation. So you raise a good point, and maybe Whitney purposefully didn't finish the deposition.
That's what I'm thinking.
So that she wouldn't be available.
She couldn't.
Excuse. Yeah.
There's one thing standing up for your sister to somebody else, but when it comes to going into a court of law and telling lies under, in a court of law, it's a vastly different thing. Knowingly telling lies, knowingly not telling the truth, then you're facing perjury, and not everybody is. Amber might be able to do that, or somebody else might be able to do that, but I don't think Whitney is made of the same cloth, and I think it's unfair of them to do. What did you think of his other witnesses, the likes of Isaac Baruch, who
I think was delightful, isn't he?
Just when he kept looking with the Amica cream, I thought at some stage, shouldn't Elaine have recognized that am I saying it wrong? It is Amica, isn't it? Because he kept saying, I've never heard of it.
Well, and one of the things about Isaac is I love that he got across, and he didn't set out to do it. It just came across in his testimony. But the pain in everybody around an abused man.
Yeah.
So, and it's partly because the culture is pretending abusive men isn't happening. So the people in the close circle, they know it's happening. And they're in that same sort of pressure cooker of the pretense that's surrounding them, and feeling so bad for their loved one, that their loved one is being abused, not only by their abuser, but by the bigger society that's abusing them, and the legal abuse that happens. So, getting the temporary restraining order under false pretenses, and trying to use the legal system to an extension of her own arm of being able to abuse the target of her abuse.
And then losing a first case, and then losing your work, and being ostracized by people who you were probably very, very good to. And you're looking at your brother, and you're almost being victimized over and over and over again, because nobody is going to believe a man. And she says it in one of the tapes. She says, go on, Johnny, why don't you say, Johnny Depp, a man, I'm a victim too. Who's going to believe you?
Yes, isn't that a very, very convincing recording? And there's a number of really convincing recordings. You've mentioned some of them. There's also a 2-hour conversation between Johnny and Amber when they were married that they consensually recorded.
Yeah.
And I've transcribed the whole 2 hours because I wanted to know, again, early in my trying to figure out what's the reality here in this situation before I come out strongly and defend a man that I was getting the impression was abused. So the 2-hour conversation is another thing to me that's very convincing. And I'd seen the snippets. So the snippets from that one are her saying things like, and it's her tone of voice that is also so convincing, so abusive, demeaning. And it's so, I didn't punch you. You weren't punched. I hit you.
I don't know.
Crybaby, and
grow up, Johnny.
Yeah.
Grow
And
up.
yeah, exactly. And also in that 2-hour recording, the snippets that weren't, so heavily publicized is her going on and on and on about you're bad because you leave when I'm angry.
When I get, instead of staying, you
Yeah.
don't come and knock on my door, and that only makes me worse. That's what I'm saying. She's reversed the whole situation. So now she's the person who keeps leaving to avoid, because the storyline is all there for her. It's
Right.
all there like a movie. Johnny Depp walks away and she does not want him to walk away. And he walks away because he doesn't want an argument or violence. And so all she had to do was then place herself in the role of Johnny Depp and reverse the roles for people to actually, for her to actually relay it without thought. But she's also in one of the tapes saying to him, I'm not interested in you. Why would I be interested in you and your fat old arse? And you're a failure and you're a loser. And at least, thank God, some of us didn't in our 20s have to play non-sexualized characters like you did in 21 Jump Street. He was in 21 Drum Street, and you're Mr. God in film. I wish I could be as perfect as you, and you've got it all sorted out in your life, and you have me sorted out. You understand. And and she just kept on and on about the fact that in his 20s he started off in 21 Jump Street, and it was unimportant role in her eyes. It wasn't a movie, it was a series, and it was nothing. It was non-sexualized, and thank God I didn't have to do it. I'll send it to you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I haven't heard that one. Yeah. I have transcribed the 2-hour conversation that I was speaking of, and I've got a blog post about it with my analysis, and it's very revealing. And there's a lot out there. So there's a lot that we, the public, have available to us to make judgments about this situation that the jury may never hear. Or the jury will hear, like I've heard 2 hours of this recording, they'll get snippets of it. And
I've heard every one of them now at this stage. But I think that one is particularly poignant because he leaves her at one stage and goes into a room to play guitar. And she comes in and she's taunting him and she's berating him and she's laughing at him in this manic laugh. For a good 5 minutes, laughing at everything he tries to say. She laughs him down, and then she walks away, and he's trying to play guitar, and she comes back in, and then she completely switches like a light switch and starts speaking very calmly to him, like just in the blink of an eye, she's a different person.
Then she's going into a wooing kind of mode.
Yeah. And then back into this manic again, insanity of laughing and sneering at him and berating everything he did and telling him he's a failure and washed up. And what would I want to be doing with you? Everything that his sister said about when she was on the stand, when she said that she kept saying to him that he was a waste of space and that he was going to be, that he was a failure, and why would Dior want him? They want people with class and style, and you don't have style.
Yes, and this is one of the ways that people who are really abusive keep the targets of their abuse with them, is by undermining their confidence and making them feel so small, and also making their head spin. Confusion is another thing that keeps people stuck in abusive relationships. I've heard that on average it takes like 5 attempts to leave an abusive relationship before you get out. And I've seen, what I've witnessed in my own experience and other people's is confirming of that kind of average.
And sometimes it takes something very little in the end to just tip you over the edge and to say, that's it. and you could be putting up with something, you could be putting up with verbal and physical and emotional abuse for many years, and suddenly you might tell somebody what's going on. They might already know what's going on, but the fact that you've verbalized it to somebody and said, this is what's happening, you almost feel like you're betraying the person you were with and can no longer go back to that relationship, because now I've told people about it. It's no longer internalized. I've told people. So I can't go back to somebody that I've told everybody is abusing me. And that was the way, that's the way it is with some people anyway. But I don't know. How do you think the trial will go? Do you think he'll? Oh, I should actually say to you before that, I mean, she took ownership, in my view, as a non-legal person. She took ownership of that online press case when she retweeted it with the words, I wrote about being the victim of sexual and physical abuse. And when she put that on Twitter, sharing the headline, she took ownership of that. So in my ignorant view, I think that should be enough to show that she actually wrote that op-ed, including the heading, which is contentious.
Yeah, I've heard that legal analysis as well, that is pivotal. And we don't know. I think we have to really prepare ourselves for the possibility that the jury will not find in either party's favor, because, again, they don't see everything we see. And it's possible that the jury will decide that, well, and sorry, I feel a sneeze coming up.
I can cut that out.
All right, should we start something over? Give me a second.
Yeah. You can. I can cut that out and put something in there.
Okay. Do you want to ask me the question again?
Yeah, no. Do you think that he will win the case, or will Amber, will they find in favor, or will they find in favor of neither of them? And I ask you that because there's it's complicated. What is abuse? I mean, you can look. I don't think there's a married couple in the world, even a child and their mother and daughter or son, that hasn't had rows with their significant other at some stage. Is that verbal abuse? No, I don't think. Is it verbal abuse for somebody to try and defend themselves by standing up for themselves verbally against an onslaught of insults and an onslaught of physical abuse? Do I think it's no? If that was the case, I believe we'd all be guilty of abuse, because I don't think there's a person in the world that hasn't raised their voice or got sarcastic with somebody, particularly when they're being shouted down constantly. But I think they're going to have to focus on the physical abuse, and particularly the fact that Amber Heard, in all of the tapes, is the aggressor.
Right. Well, they've got the photos with the bruises on Amber, which it'll be interesting to see how Johnny's team deals with that. I don't find them convincing at all, the photos with the bruises on Amber, but will the jury? That's a piece we'll have to watch for, because if the jury decides, well, there just has to be some abuse that we think is there, and then she gets to say what she said, I mean, that's a possibility.
But then what are you supposed to do in a situation where you're in a violent relationship and one person happens to be a female and the other, the victim happens to be a man? Is he supposed to allow himself be a punching bag and sit there and say nothing and not raise his voice, that in itself is mental torture, to be in a relationship where you can't walk away because you might make them worse, you can't stay because you'll get physically abused, and you can't retaliate either verbally or physically because you become then the he's just as bad. I mean, people have got killed by their partners for less than that. And and I mean, when you look at her bruises on the James Corden show the night after, I mean, it was miraculous. And for a woman who taped everybody, including Jerry Judge, in Australia, she left the tape recording there, turned it on, went to her room and was taping to hear what they would say. They had no idea. They all said she was after cutting his finger off. Yeah. In all the tapes she did, in the bruise that she took a photograph of her on her arm with no finger marks on it whatsoever. It was just painted. The little bruise she had in her face that was gone the following day, when she was out with her friend. Why didn't she take a photograph of all the times she said he pulled her naked across glass on the floor? Right. Why did she dance in the Danish girl the following day with her feet when they were supposed to have been run across glass? She's just a miracle woman. I mean, the woman is just they should actually do tests on her to try and help everybody else in that situation, because it's miraculous. And she never took one photograph of any of that or the bottle incident.
Exactly. I hope that these are the kinds of things that the jury puts together.
I wish I was on the jury.
The extravagance of her lying, I hope. And this is one of the things that happens is these personalities, when, as I said earlier, they lie and they're like fed by people believing them. Their lies tend to get more and more extravagant. And this is often the undoing of them, is when the lies get so extravagant. I've seen this happen where, people are maligning somebody else, defaming them. And initially people believe, but then the lies get more and more extravagant. And then people go, oh, well, I know that didn't happen. That makes no sense. So now, okay, it's all lies. Not everybody gets there, but
we all want to believe a person when they come forward and they say that they're a victim of abuse. It's human nature. But we also want to believe men when they say that I didn't abuse or I did abuse. We want to be balanced. And, there are too many men that are being accused of abuse that when they didn't do it, and vice versa. And also there are too many men out there who have nowhere to turn when they're the victims of abuse. And I wonder what this case, I see it as a landmark case. I've written on posts about it, for me, when people say things like, why are we looking at these two millionaires and these two Hollywood actors? And I keep saying, but look deeper than that. Look at at what it's telling us about society, about ourselves, and how important this case is. If it can happen, Johnny Depp, it can certainly happen any one of your sons, your brothers, your male friends, your uncles, your fathers. But I don't think some people see that. They see the dollar signs and they see the rich people and think, oh, well, they're, immune to suffering and that they're immune to being wronged and that we shouldn't care because they have money or they're successful.
I really hope that this is a watershed moment where people's eyes are being opened. And just like my experience many years ago, when my eyes were open, then I could see things that I was blind to before. And I hope that's what's going to happen here. And so people will see not only, Johnny was a victim of very, very severe abuse from his wife, but many, many men are being abused some at that level, some at lesser levels, and that it matters.
Even more, and some are murdered by their wives. And and people think, oh, well, there must have been a reason. He must have done this, or he must have done that. He's way bigger than her, or, him, and there's always a but he must have.
Blaming him. And in the same crowd that is whining about victim blaming women, turns around and victim blames men. And saying, just like you said, if a man is harmed by a woman, it must be because it's the man's fault. He must have done something to provoke her. He must be mean to her. Otherwise, she wouldn't behave so badly. It's just not the truth of it.
But I think what she did, the defecation scene, I think that should be a red flag to any man on a jury or woman, that this was not a woman who was, and coupled with the tapes, this was not a woman who was afraid of her husband.
Yes, you make a great point there, because so not only do we have evidence that she abused Johnny, but we have evidence that she doesn't fit the pattern anywhere close to a resemblance of behavior of a person who is a victim of their partner. Because she is so demeaning and aggressive. She's so aggressive. And one of the things that just stands out to me is the knife that she sent Johnny as a gift that said in Spanish something like "until death."
Till death.
And this is after, in her storyline, she's been severely abused by him. In fact, I can't remember exactly the date of it, but definitely after her claims.
It was after he tried to say to her, look, take my blood. If that's the only thing left that you can take. And he was holding a knife up to his hand, and he cried on the stand when they replayed it. And it was because he was saying, you've taken everything from me. I've given you everything. The only thing I can give you is my blood. What more do you want from me? And she was shouting, oh, don't, Johnny, don't, stop, please. And she was taping him instead of helping him. And then after that, she bought him a knife.
I don't know if that's the sequence, because I'm thinking that the tape that you just described is when she coerced him into meeting her in the hotel after they were separated.
They were separated.
Yeah. And really interesting about that recording. I've been at this for so long, and I'm skeptical. When I'm listening to people's stories, I'm skeptical, and I'm very experienced in hearing practiced liars and trying to see through that. But I'm surprised when I get caught in, I missed that part. So when she says, oh, Johnny, oh, don't do that. It's not video, it's audio, right? And so chances are he's not doing anything. That is her, she's just putting on this act of don't do that. And then the listener, because she's the one secretly recording this, the listener would fill in the blanks. I had a woman that I talked to who was describing her very manipulative husband. And there was an incident when the kids were living at home, and the kids were around a table. She and her husband were on the other side of a peninsula. I don't know if you use that term in the kitchen for a cupboard right?
An island.
Okay. And they are on the other side. So the kids couldn't see the feet of mom and dad.
Yeah.
And out of nowhere, dad says to mom, stop standing on my feet. Don't do that. Don't do that. Well, she's not standing on his feet, but the kids, he's created this illusion that the kids walk away with, that mom's being mean to dad.
But she did that also to him in another episode where he was walking away. He said, Amber, I'm going to take my space. I'll be back later. I'm going away. And she was shouting, don't hit me. Don't push me. Don't pushed me against a wall. And he said, Amber, and you could hear that they were miles apart. She was at one end of the room, he was at the other end of the room going out the door, and she was shouting because it was all taped. But in the tape that you're talking about, it's noticeable that her voice is louder than his, because her voice is clearer, nearer to the tape, and she's talking almost into the tape, whereas he's at the other side of the room saying, this is all you have to take from me. This is the only thing I can give you is my blood. You've taken everything else. You've taken my livelihood. You've taken my career. You've taken my friends. Some of them. And I just wonder, the whole thing is just so sad. It's just
it is,
just,
and that she thought that recording of him being so desperately despondent over the torture. It's a tortured man in that recording, and that she would use that against him.
But as well as that, Anne, don't you reckon, when you're a professional person at this, when you look at Johnny Depp not looking, not making eye contact, I mean, I have done art and that, and I know when I'm trying to focus on what people are saying very often in classrooms and that, I was always a doodler. So I'm doodling, which actually focuses my mind on rather than external things like looking out a window, or nuns in school used to say to my mother, she's very bright, Maura, if she stopped looking out the window and counting the leaves on the trees. So I used to start doodling so I could focus on what was being said. And I can see that in Johnny Depp. He said he'd never look her straight in the face ever again. He never wanted to see her face. That to me is a clear sign of a domestic abuse victim, when you can't look the person in the eye. On the other hand, she has stared him down the entire testimony, almost like terrified, trying to unnerve him.
Right. And her she's got like a groupie who puts out her message basically on social media, and she has criticized Johnny for not looking Amber in the face. Well, a domestic violence victim would be normal for them to not want to look their abuser in the eye. I think that his doodling helps him also control probably his anxiety, and I hope that the jury sees it as okay.
I think his testimony came across incredibly likable and absolutely the man that everybody was saying. I had to laugh when Alejandro was on the stand inside with vaping.
Okay.
Giving his testimony.
Oh, right.
It was very funny. But when Malcolm Connolly, the Scottish bodyguard, was asked, did Johnny pay him, I think it was $8,400, he looked and he said, oh no, he gave me a lot more than that in gifts. And when he was on the stand, you could see the type, that this warm person, which you don't get from Amber Heard. You get no sense of warmth from her. And her clothing, to me, suggests power rather than victimhood.
Right.
It's always these power suits that she's wearing with the shirts and replicating what he's wearing the second day. But, she has never come in a skirt or a dress or looked in any way genteel, or that she would be the victim of abuse. She's always looked like she's a strong person and unable and not somebody that would be victimized by a partner.
So I think that on her second, that's true for most of the time. And I think her second day of testimony, she was wearing a matronly white dress.
That's right.
With a little tie, so demure. Yeah, she definitely does a lot of staging. Yeah. but some of it isn't that well. So the demure dress, that fits kind of what she was trying to do. But I agree, a lot of her power suits, they didn't portray what you would think she'd be after. Instead, they were, I think in many ways they were mocking Johnny.
That's what I think. That's what I think. And even, do you know, the last day of testimony with this awful shirt inside her, was it the last day of testimony, blouse tied in a knot that she didn't even tie in a bow. She was tying in a bow, and she was everything was coiffured properly. And then suddenly she has this tied in about 3 knots, and I'm looking at the neckline, and I'm thinking, wouldn't somebody have tied the bow properly for her? Because it just looks like it was just shoved on her for the testimony. And I'm trying to make out what she was aiming with that look. You know, the cream blouse that she had.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know.
She just had it tied in knots at the side. And I'm thinking, one, it's too old looking for her appearance from what we see of her, what she wears normally,
right?
Or wears going out. And then suddenly she's going from being in power suits to this blouse that isn't bothered. They haven't even bothered to tie in a bow.
Well, what could have gone on that day was, if that's the second day of testimony, she was spending a lot of time dealing with her cuff.
That's right.
Rolling up her cuff, and there's people online who are saying it looks like she had a Kleenex hidden in that
and a box of them in front of her,
and that Kleenex was potentially had the menthol on it to try and bring up the tears, the acting trick of trying to conjure tears. So maybe that's what went on. I don't know about that.
Before we finish, and do you want to tell us a bit about your book?
Oh, sure. So I wrote the book, Abuse of Men by Women, and because I was finding such a lack of resources for men who are abused, and even women who are abusive to their male partners, because what's out there, and unfortunately still for the most part, what's out there is giving some minor lip service to the possibility a man could be abused by a woman, but then only examples of he's bad, she's good. And if a man goes to that resource and he is the target of abuse by a woman, it's just going to reinforce for him, I can't be right. Because they can't see themselves in any of these examples. And also, there's a lot of men have the experience of when they do reach out to like the domestic hotline and that sort of thing, they get accused of being abusive themselves.
Yeah.
And probably because the sort of party line is, well, when men are abused by women, it's because it's their fault. They did something mean to bring it on. So I felt like there was this big need to fill the void of information. So my intent was, it's a book for men who are abused to sort out what is their, or think they might be, sort out their situation, figure out, am I or am I not? And even for women to call themselves to account, and for people who help people to get their eyes open to the reality of it, and even for the general population to become more aware of what's going on, what it looks like when women abuse men, and have that eye-opening experience.
Because when you look at it, Anne, there, something you said there earlier, going back to Isaac Baruch and that in his testimony about it affecting the whole family, and he was saying, what she's done, the lies she has told, has affected Johnny, and not just Johnny, but Johnny's family, and we're all affected. And he got upset and cried. It's like, I suppose, you look at somebody who takes drugs or takes or is an alcoholic, doesn't just, or somebody who's a gambler, doesn't just affect that person. it has all these adverse effects on everyone within their close, watching them suffer. And when you watch someone you love suffer, you suffer along with them. So it makes not just a victim of one person, or, you're not just challenging. Amber Heard wasn't just challenging Johnny Depp. She was challenging his entire family, his children, his previous relationship, previous partner, and Vanessa Paradis, and his sister, and everyone who loved him in his life, and everyone who stood by him, were all suffering as a consequence of the lies of one woman.
Yes, yeah, and I see this, and it happens
it's like addiction. It's an addiction in itself.
Yeah, and it does, and I'm glad you bring that up, because I have a part in the book that's for families and friends of men who are being abused, because they do need some support. And part of it is, if you have a guy that you care about, that you think is being abused by his wife or girlfriend, that guy might not be able to hear it when you raise concerns, but hang in there. Try and keep the relationship going, because if at some point he starts to think about it in a different way, then you'll be great to be available to him.
Chances are he probably has seen it, but isn't prepared to accept it in his own head. And as long as he doesn't mention it to or discuss it with his friend, and almost, I suppose, vocalize the fact that he knows it's happening, he can actually keep it. He can keep the relationship going. But it's when you actually vocalize it at times, that's the line you've crossed. You kind of,
So that it plays out like that sometimes, and other times different ways. But if people out there can educate themselves so they can be prepared to be the support system for somebody, that's really crucial.
Yeah. Well, and thank you very much for being my guest, Anne Silvers from Seattle in Washington in the United States. Thank you very much for being my guest today, and best wishes to you with your book. And I'll have images of your book up here and information on where it can be got. So thank you again for being my guest.
Thank you. And if people want to, they can visit my website, annsilvers.com. No E on Ann.
No E on N.
Right.
ANNSILVERS.
Right.
.com. I'll have all the information up there, Ann. But again, Shindera leis an chlár. That's the end of the show for today. Until the next time, Lacuna of Day. Bwalam tu galir chiacana sonus agus gra. I wish you peace, happiness, and love. Agus gadeshiv slán. Slán, Ann. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks a million, Ann. I'll cut that there now. And and thank you. And if you ever want to come on again with me, just give me an email, or and I'll have you on in a show.
Okay. And will you send me a link when it's done?
I'll send it to you. I'll send it, and you can do what you can share away. Thanks, Ann.
Thank you.
God bless. Bye-bye.